George Kilpatrick Inspiration for the Nation, celebrating people we feel good about. Raquan Pride-Green is the executive director of Blueprint 15. You know what they're charged with? They are charged with making sure that the neighborhood, which was former, well, it wasn't the 15th ward, but it is. Well, you tell me what it is. But basically, they're there to advocate to make sure that the housing, residents, and the area known as Blueprint 15, with the development that they have planned for the area, stays true to the core values of making sure that there remains affordable housing in an area that is going to be redeveloped over the next few years, particularly from the Syracuse Housing Authority, which will be demolishing all of its existing housing to make room for some new public housing. In Blueprint 15, part of their task is to help keep everybody honest. Is that the best way to put it? How would you put it, Raekwon?
That's a great way to put it. Like I always say, we advocate for the residents. We make sure the residents are involved, have a seat at the decision-making table, and aware of everything that's to come. And that's why these recent events were so egregious, from the
Let,
perspective of Blueprint 15 and our staff.
let's talk about it. All right, so here's what we understand from the perspective of published reports that came out a couple of weeks ago. So there's the tract of housing that's on the other side of 81, closest to University Hospital. Those units in there, about 92 units.
92, yeah.
92 units, and those units were scheduled to be demolished at some point. And the Syracuse Housing and Upstate had an agreement that Upstate would then purchase that land at a great sum for millions. I think it was over $100 million. I'm not sure.
Like 125, I believe, was the number.
125 million, and they were going to. It was disclosed that Upstate had planned to build an optometry school on that site, and they had announced it in the paper, and it was yay, ring the bells, and all of that, except for one thing. So let me take my honest reaction. I said this on the radio last week. When I heard about this, just from what I read, I was like, wow, that's contradictory, it seems. Now, just from what I had heard all along. Now, this is just me. I'm a lay person. So you on the ground, tell me what. So then I understand there was a pause, and let's talk about how that happened and shed any light you have for our audience, since you're the advocate for the tenants, of what happened and why the pause happened. So take us through all of that.
Okay. So yeah, the SHA and Upstate made that agreement regarding the 92 units on the east side of the I-81 bridge, but still part of the Pioneer Homes. And like there's a lot that went into that. So SHA had that conversation with them. I don't know if they had a formalized agreement. I believe it was just a verbal agreement. But they did have renderings and things like that. And the way it's supposed to go is SHA, to make any decision like that, get it approved through their board. But it was for the CNI application, the Choice Neighborhood Initiative application. It's a federal grant.
Which had a deadline, right?
The deadline is today.
Oh.
So Bill Simmons was trying to, because that's a $50 million grant, but this is like a $800 million plus project. So Bill Simmons was trying to find ways to bring more money into the project so that we can close some of the financial gaps. So I know he's painted as the villain, and I don't agree with his decision, but I don't want to vilify him either, because he has a hard job and he has a lot on his plate. So I think he was trying to find another solution of what to do with those units, and he just didn't follow the protocol. Like, he was supposed to clear with his board. Then there was supposed to be some resident engagement that would include the people who live in the Pioneer Homes, as well as Blueprint 15. In terms of the CNI application, the city of Syracuse, so the mayor's office, they're the co-applicants. So it wasn't agreed upon with them either. And I don't think this was supposed to be put in the paper, but I think it got out before he can follow the steps that he was trying to follow. So the article comes out January 30th. Just so happened Blueprint 15 had a board meeting that evening. We typically would have had it the week before, but for whatever reason, scheduling conflicts, we pushed it back a week, which turned out to be for the better. and Sharon Owens, the deputy mayor, is our board president. Bill Simmons is on our board along with two of his board members. We also have representation from upstate. We also have representation from the health center who just built the new facility. And we have a couple neighborhood residents on the board, and as well as Blueprint 15 staff attended as well. So the conversation went on, and Sharon in particular, and my neighborhood navigators, Tyra Harris and Sabrina Smalls, really pushed back on not being a part of the conversation, basically saying we don't want this, we never wanted this, we never asked for this, or in any of the 56 community engagement meetings, because he gave a specific number, did we say we want an optometry school. And also there's other options for people who live in our neighborhood, whether it's the health center, Presidential Plaza, or other upstate facilities that they can go for that type of service. So as a result of that, SHA had an emergency meeting on Wednesday morning, afternoon, and then on Thursday, the article came out that the plan was put on pause. So more conversation went on where like it can be a conversation about having mixed use, but they definitely don't want it to just go to upstate. And some of my neighborhood navigators were saying like the same thing you thought, like this is contradictory. So they spoke on how they worked so hard to build credibility with their neighbors, and then for this to come out, and we all know a lot of people believe that all that land to be bought up by upstate or SU or other private developers and not benefit the people who currently live there. Another thing is, even if SHA was able to get everybody to agree, they would still have to get it cleared by HUD, and they would have to show HUD that it legitimately benefits the people who live there. And I'm not sure if they would have been able to do that. But those 92 families that live in those units would still have housing, because once the Pioneer Homes is knocked down, it's going to be rebuilt, and it's going to be double the capacity. So there will be twice as many units. So it would have been enough, even if that was to be the case with the project. A lot of people were saying they would be displaced and kicked out. That wouldn't have been the case. They would have just lived on the other side of the bridge. Well, other side
Yes,
of the community grid, because it wouldn't be a bridge.
yeah, let's clarify that. I'm glad you brought that up. So the 92 units, you're not so much opposed to development there as much as the fact that the protocol appears to not have been followed, or right. Is that I understand? In other words, and I think you said this to me on background, that those 92 units wouldn't impact the overall project at SHA, because there's still going to be room on the other side. So that's kind of a misnomer, right? In some ways.
Yeah. And the residents, some that I've spoken to, they're not opposed to development as long as it's something they want, like a grocery store or a laundromat. Just throwing out examples. Everybody will be happy to see a grocery store there, even people who don't live in that neighborhood. But they just wanted to be something that they want and that they had a seat at the table to decide on, whether it be housing, a mixed use facility, or a commercial facility. But they didn't want it to just be bought up by upstate for an optometry school where they feel like it wouldn't benefit them. They also mentioned having their security offices over there, which they didn't feel like would be there for them. It would have just been there to protect upstate and their assets.
So just to reiterate, the project they were trying to meet a deadline, but in their haste, let's project that, right? They just didn't include the residents, and maybe there wasn't enough time given the deadline, but be that as it may, that's just not how this process is supposed to work. Where are the residents now in terms of their trust of SHA? Because what I was thinking is that again, just to reiterate, the very thing that we didn't expect to happen appeared to be happening, right? We're just going to do what we're going to do, and then we'll come to the residents later and tell them this is what we did, without asking them, as you suggested, that they just want to have input so that they can say, okay, yeah, we agree to this. So going forward, what do you think is going to happen? Because there's going to be other things, right? And what do you think is going to happen, or how then does Blueprint 15 and others make sure that this doesn't happen again?
Yeah, and I won't say that we can definitely make sure that it doesn't happen again, but I think it was enough pushback from our group and people externally that this shouldn't happen again. Housing is going to have another board meeting and maybe implement this as part of their own protocol. What we had in place was an agreement because we're all in partnership to support the residents, but I think they have to formalize it now because the pushback was just so intense, and I don't think like they it's hard to say. Like it just was a bad decision. It wasn't one of their best moments. And I don't think that they can withstand that to continue to happen.
Uh,
Especially being that they couldn't have executed that anyway, without the support of all parties involved.
the names mentioned, used Bill Simmons, Calvin Carter was also mentioned in that in the article. And people who know Calvin, who know Bill, know them as people who are care about the community, those kinds of things. And you went out of your way to say you don't think that. Well, what do you think about that? I'm not going to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it was a bad decision, but I understand as like I'm an executive director like Bill, and I had to report to a board. So I understand having the conversation than to bring it back to your board versus just shooting an idea out to your board. Sometimes your board, they're busy people. A lot of them have jobs too. You want to come to them with your idea at least half baked, and then they can help you make the decision going forward. So me wanting to see the good in people, and I believe Bill is a decent individual. I believe that's kind of where he was coming from. But I think he spoke too soon about it and it got out publicly before he can reach back to everybody he needed to talk to. I
Mm-hmm.
think they would have said no anyway, but I think it would have just been to his benefit to have just followed protocol before having any conversations with people outside of the group.
What does this say then about citizen engagement and who's making the decisions and who's making the calls and how to ensure residents have the involvement?
I think this was a wake up call for some residents that they should pay more attention to what's going on, because the invitation is there, and some residents engage and some don't, and they all have their different reasons. Some are extremely busy, and some just don't think this project is going to happen. It's been talked about for 10, 15 years, so
Mm-hmm.
I think now it just made it a lot more realer for people who live there and people who've been withdrawn from being engaged.
Yeah, because here's another piece of it, right? You're talking, you're inviting people, you're having public meetings, you're saying, come hear what we have to say. And then when we do it, and then you're gonna come run back. Well, we didn't know, but we told you to
Yeah,
come
yeah.
to the meeting or have a representative or do something. So it's kind of a both and in some ways.
Yeah, they just have to meet us halfway, and some do. It's not like all of them are disengaged or not paying attention. It's just not enough of them, and it's not enough of the younger people who live in the neighborhood from what I've been seeing. They come to some of our community engagement events, but when we have these meetings, like Pioneer Homes and McKinney Manor have tenant meetings monthly, I don't see the numbers that we should see. And some meetings are better attended than others. But then there's also these public meetings that SHA had to facilitate for the CNI grant, where more people could have been involved. It's been a couple that had decent attendance, but considering how many families live there, it should have been standing room only from my perspective.
So this is a wake up call for everybody, right? And I
Absolutely.
think this is a great recruitment tool. If you want to make change in your community, if you want to be part of the future of your neighborhood, and if you love your neighborhood, then you got to be part of this process. And that's what it's going to take. So for Blueprint 15 and your advocacy, just remind viewers and listeners what Blueprint 15 is for the area and its role in all of this.
Yeah, so we're a neighborhood serving organization. We've been around about 4 or 5 years now. And we don't only support the Syracuse Housing Authority residents that live within our footprint. When I say footprint, I mean East Adams Street to the north, East Colvin Street to the south, South Salina Street to the west, and Almond Street / I-81 to the east. So that means people who live on Baker Ave, Garfield, within that spot, Elizabeth,
Oakwood.
Oakwood, like it, like you name it. So it's those projects, and then there's the streets in that area. So we do most of our engagement with the SHA residents because they're gonna be impacted the most by the transformation. But we have done things in the southern part of the footprint, as we call it, beyond MLK, to engage them. And like we have an event coming up this weekend, Saturday at the Beach and Branch Library called Grandma Reads, and it's to encourage literacy and reading amongst the elders and the youngest of our residents. And it's a public event for
It would
everybody.
have happened already by the time people see or hear this, but
Yeah.
that's an example of the kinds of things that you're doing throughout the footprint. And you're right. I never think of Calvin and all of and Salina and all of that in between as part of your footprint, and helping those residents as well. Where did I go to something? I'm trying to think of where it was. Oh, it was in the footprint. I went to hear CCA do a presentation over, I don't know what the name of the place is, but it was on Birch Street. It was something it
Oh,
was on,
the AOT building,
I guess it's a like
the
a
tall
new,
building right on the corner of State and Burt.
not that building. It's in it's newish. I don't know where I
It might be Freedom Commons.
Yes, thank
Maybe.
you.
Yeah.
That's where I was. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and that's in the footprint as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did go to Freedom. That's where I was. Thank you. Okay. Like I
Yeah.
said, newish building. It's not new, but
Yeah, it's a few years old, but yeah, like we're doing a lot of things. We're trying to do a better job of engaging people in the southern part of the footprint. We're working with Dunbar Center to try to partner with Equitable and Kaboom to redesign that playground they have because it's probably, I'm sure, it's older than me. So trying to give them a modernized playground. We did a rental repair program where it was a matching grant for landlords who lived in that neighborhood up to 10,000 per unit so that they can provide a better living environment for the people who live there. And I'm working on another project called Buildings Up, where we're trying to install heat pumps in some of those homes as well to give them better heating and cooling and electrification. We're still really early in the process, but along with that, we're trying to find minority contractors and provide the training so that they can do the installations, as well as be a part of all this transformation that's going to take place in our neighborhood.
You grew up in public housing. What does this mean for you?
It's personal for me because some of my family still live there. People I grew up with still live there. If they don't live there anymore, they still pass through there. Um, being in the Pioneer Homes at that time, I didn't really value it as much. It was just where my grandparents lived and where I had to go when my mother needed a babysitter. So now that I'm older, it just I learned the history of the neighborhood and it's like it's really important to this city. So it means a lot to be able to contribute to it in a positive way and help some of the people that I've seen my whole life along the way.
And it's also important for you to be able to say, "Look, I was running through here too, right?"
Mhm.
And does that give you like credibility in the conversations that you have with
Yeah.
people?
It gives me credibility, and then my staff. I have 4 part-timers, 3 from the Pioneer Homes and 1 from McKinney Manor. So to be able to say like we all have ties to this neighborhood, we didn't just come from somewhere else and decided to want to come and be the hero. Like we people who live or lived here and we genuinely care. So we want to make sure the people that we know or always been around are cared for and have options. They can stay, they can go, but they should be able to make that choice for themselves.
Well, thank you, Raquan, for clearing up all of what we heard around, and also clearing the names, right? he said, I don't think they meant any harm, people. I just think they went too fast. So I know that's probably good for them to know that that's what you think. And did you tell them that?
I haven't had a conversation with them yet, but I will because Bill and Calvin is on my board along with Chris Montgomery, the SHA vice president of their board. So we have a lot of conversations and interactions with each other. And like at the end of the day, we're all partners. So we just want the best. And I think sometimes we have different methods of how we're supposed to get there, which happens in a lot of different partnerships when so many different people are involved.
And I think at the end of the day, all of you want the best for the community at the end of the day,
Absolutely.
for the residents. Like you said, it's a big nut in terms of the what has to be done in terms of the housing and what they have to do. And so thank you for setting the record straight, right?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for the platform because a lot of people just go right and talk. They don't really talk to the people involved.
What do you say? Go figure, right? Uh, um, while you have the microphone, are there anything? Is there anything else you want us to know about? You know, you had the event already yesterday. What else do you want us to know about your role or Blueprint
Mhm.
15 and what the community can look forward to or what you need from us?
Yeah, so one of the things we always get asked, what's gonna happen to the residents? Like I went to Oasis Academy today and spoke to some teenage boys that's in the Build a Men program, and one of those young men had asked, like, what's gonna happen to the residents? And I was happy that he asked that question and that he even thought about it in that way. But I want everybody to know that it's not going to be a mass exodus. Like people will be relocated in phases. So McKinney Manor will be the first one that's furthest away from the bridge, but it's also the least dense. It's 75 units broken up into 3 cul-de-sacs. And it's not even fully occupied right now. I think it's only about 53 to 55 families currently living there. So moving those families out in phases by the 20 or 25. Some of them have the option to go into other SHA developments, and others they can get a voucher. There's a RAD voucher and a Section 8 voucher. But what we did to support them is we partner with SHA to contract Urban Strategies, which is a national organization that has done this time and time again. So what they will do so far, they've been engaging with the residents of McKinney Manor. They'll eventually make their way to Pioneer Homes. I'm doing surveys to figure out the family's success plan. What do you have planned for your family, whether it's more employment, better employment, education, and so on and so forth. They will help them find housing. They will help them pack. They will help them move based on the family's needs. Um, so that's one thing we made the investment to bring them on, and then they will support those families while they're relocated elsewhere. And when those units are done, they will engage those families again to determine if they want to come back or if they want to stay where they are or move somewhere else. So these people will not be just displaced and left out in the cold. They will have the support of them, SHA, and Blueprint 15 throughout the process.
Thank God you're looking for you're thinking about the residents. I was at a community meeting in the town of DeWitt. A new development was proposed, and the question was asked of the developer: have you in this? They've got some units. Have you thought about is affordable housing a part of your plan? And they were like, no, it's too expensive. You know what I mean? So it's just interesting that, and you could just and we hadn't thought about it, ain't gonna think about it, and we're not putting it in, right? Like
Yeah,
what?
yeah.
But this is the reality of what's happening, right? Market rate, and there needs to be places where people can afford to live, or else we're going to see housing vulnerability to continue. And by the way, what I just said is on the record. It was said and it was documented.
Yeah, yeah.
But
And
go
it
ahead.
is expensive though to only have low income housing is and that's why you see a lot of low income neighborhoods or buildings poorly managed because they're not making the money to maintain it. And for that reason, a lot of people are going with the mixed income model, but it's also better for people socially. Like you want to have that diversity.
Right,
When you think of like you mentioned Calvin Quarters, like we've seen what he went to do with his career, and he's out of Central Village, right?
right,
It would have been great for the next generation to see that same figure passing through the neighborhood on a daily basis, and he's just Calvin or Cal to them, not
right,
Mr. Quarters, the
right, right, right,
executive.
right.
So
But he as he goes from the corner to the corner office.
right. And they don't see him as much anymore. And
Right.
it makes income, you get to have that. Like if my mother is low income, but my next door neighbor is medium or high income, it doesn't really matter. We're all here together, going to school, learning and playing together. And
Yeah.
you get
And
exposed to those opportunities because of that network.
so maybe one or two units, right? I mean, we're not saying that every unit
Yeah,
we're
this is
like,
a nice percentage.
yeah,
Ours
yeah,
would be a
yeah.
bigger percentage, but out there they could do 5, 10%. It's not gonna hurt too much.
Well, it ain't gonna happen in that project. Well, as said by the developer. Now,
Yeah, yeah,
but again, this is about your community. So if you want that in DeWitt and you want more of it, you show up at those town board meetings and insist that that's what happens in whatever community you live in, right? You
yeah,
got
yeah.
to you you have to make your voices heard, because there's a reason why 81 goes through the 15th ward and didn't go through other parts of the city, right?
Right,
Because
right.
of the perceived power and the voice, and so, and I'm not making light of that. I'm just saying that we've got to collectively use our power. And I gave a talk this week, Raquan, a brief talk, inspired by my mentor, Dr. Rick Wright. And I was thinking about the fact that on the corner of East Genesee Street and Pine was a way station on the Underground Railroad. That property does no longer exist. If we were able to stop the bulldozer, if we were thinking, we would have something that would have been preserved for history. But
Yeah,
we didn't know, and now it's gone. And
right.
now it's just a marker. And so this is why we've got to talk about our history. This is why we have to preserve our history. And it's because we are coming together collectively that we make a difference. And Dr. Wright, since we're talking about that, he wants to see on that side. That's out of your blueprint, Raquan. So you can say, well, good luck with that, right? But he wants to see some permanent recognition of that way station on that property. It's owned by somebody else, and they want to probably put something else over there. But it would be nice to have a permanent marker, some kind of facility there that
Yeah, yeah.
honors the legacy of Reverend Jermaine Wesley Logan, who was called the king of the Underground Railroad. Harriet was the conductor. He was called the king. And she's the main, she's the conductor, the chief caboose, whatever you want to call it. She's all of it.
Yeah,
But
everything, yeah.
he was named the king for Syracuse, right? For Syracuse. We're talking about Syracuse because he was a fervent abolitionist who was who escaped slavery. So
Yeah, so much rich history for our people in particular that a lot of us just never really learned. It wasn't talked about enough. And
no.
yeah,
And if we're not careful, which is another thing I said, it'll be erased, which you see happening in other parts of the country. And so that we're all off on another track here, but it's also about keeping our history alive. And what this happened with the residents, what they did, or what the people in position, if you think about it, if certain people weren't in place, this could have happened like all the other stuff. So that's progress. The people spoke and it was paused. Now, what does pause mean? Well, we're going to circle back, and you know what? It could still happen if the right relationships and conversations are held. And so I think we should say that too, right? It's not dead. It's
it's not dead. If the
Yeah.
residents was like, okay, I see your point, and it wouldn't be so bad, then it could happen. But it was at the discretion of the residents versus the powers that be.
There you go. Raquan Pride-Green is the executive director of Blueprint 15, where I'm going to see if I can remember all your area. Adams Street to the north, Carvin Street to the south, Salina Street to the west, and something to the east. What?
Allman Street 81.
Thank you. Raquan, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Inspiration for the nation.